There was this interesting story that came out of New South Wales this morning. A New South Wales primary school employee has been criminally charged for using a fake jab certificate in order to keep their job. There was a post by New South Wales Police this morning, and the Sydney Morning Herald did an article saying that at 8:30 a.m. yesterday, Tuesday, police executed a search warrant at a home at Merrylands, seizing cash, documentation, and electronic items as a part of a greater strike force they're doing. A 55-year-old woman was arrested and charged with dishonestly obtaining financial advantage by deception. It will be alleged in court the woman used a fraudulent document to verify her jab status with her employer. The Merrylands West woman, who is a school administrative manager, was refused bail to appear at Fairfield Local Court today, Wednesday. To date, 20 people have been charged for various offences, including drug supply, fraud, proceeds of crime, and participate in or direct criminal group. All remain before the courts. Investigations under Strike Force Sugarcane are continuing. So that's the greatest strike force that's going on. It's not just to deal with what's happened with this lady, but it seems like the strike force was set up for other means. Now, in order to better analyze what's going on here, because you probably had the same knee-jerk reaction I did, are they cracking down on people that have got a fake jab certificate? We all know people that have used it in order to keep their profession. I've got Samir Banger to actually talk about this. He's from Banger Legal with me. Samir, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate your time and thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure. So what's going on here? Obviously, a lot of people they're not. If they're like me, you would have had a similar reaction to this. What's actually happening in this situation?
Look, we've got to remember the clickbait stuff, right? So the newspaper's going to put in what sells and what's going to catch people's attention, and that's the COVID vaccine certificate. Bang, fake certificate. She's done something wrong. But what we need to look at is this is all part of an investigation. There is nothing abnormal. In fact, it's quite common for police to target people around a certain person that they're investigating. Now, in this case, she's the mother of the person they're investigating. They've gone in, from my understanding, done a swoop of the house, and in that period, they've found, I guess, other concerns or other alleged offences, this being one of them. So I'm assuming they've gone through the phone or whatever the case may be, and they've found this. It's one of the best ways for police to put pressure on a particular accused. This happens all the time with, I guess, gang leaders or people who are of interest to the police. So in that raid, or in the process of targeting this person, the mother of the accused, has then come under fire herself. And that's where they've disclosed, apparently they've figured out that there's a fake certificate and they've charged her with that. And interestingly, the police didn't give her bail. I'm pretty sure she wouldn't have a record based on what I'm seeing, although I'm speculating. However, the police decided that she was such a high risk, they didn't want to give her bail. Hence, she presented to court, and I'm pretty sure now would have been granted bail, although I don't know the conditions and the whole facts just yet. But what we need to look at is the knee-jerk reaction makes sense, because the way I read that the first time was the same. But then when I looked into it a bit more and the gang links and whatnot, that completely changes it for me. So this is just by accident that they've found something. That's my opinion at the moment anyway. There could be a lot more that takes this either way. It could be a swoop one way, or it could just be further linked to, I guess you could say, the gang investigation. But I can completely understand why you and other people have had that reaction. But I guess we need to look under it and find out what's going on. And look, there's still a lot more facts that need to come to light as well. We only know a little bit, but from what we do know, I would actually speculate this is just, it's collateral damage, so to speak. They've found someone and she's come under the firing line just because of who she is rather than what she's done.
Yeah, they did make note in the Sydney Morning Herald article that, yeah, this does seem to be something that they just sort of stumbled across it as a result. But as you said, it could be a leveraging thing in order to get the son to cave. I mean, going after the mother is a bit low. But let's say this turns for the worst, in the sense that it sets some precedences that they then use to go after other people that have used jab certificates. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this show know people that have either paid a doctor or paid for some form of fake jab certificate. Are you worried at all in any precedent that could be set from this?
Well, yeah, because whatever this person's sentence, this mother's sentence, is going to be based on at this stage, I'm assuming the fact that she's given it to the school to continue her employment, the fact that she has one, which does set a precedent for anyone else who comes under fire. The question is, how badly does she get hit? Does she get a fine? Does she get jail term? Is it a conditional release order without a conviction? How strong they go? And at this stage, we don't know. And
Mm.
part of that could also be a part, the pressure. But putting aside that this is pressure, let's just say, even if it is, but she gets a jail term, that then sets a precedent for other people. Because if you are caught and you are charged with allegedly, using a fake certificate for whatever gain it may be, then you are facing somewhat of a similar penalty if your circumstances are similar. You obviously would argue that it's not. But yes, Joel, look, this can be concerning. This can turn into something more concerning. However, it's going to take a great devotion of resources too.
Mm.
I think states like Victoria and WA would have gone really hard if they were going to do it.
Mm.
I have been told, at least by people who are in the police or were in the police, that there was effectively it was stopped. They didn't go down that path because the amount of resources they'd need to devote to cracking down on this would be immense. And the police aren't exactly the best resource around the country. So you have to see the same thing here in New South Wales, for example. Really, really, like the governments would have to decide this is what we want to do, and we're going to add extra resources or divert extra resources to this particular issue, such as what we have with the war on crime or the war on drugs and stuff like that, or particular ethnic communities when they get targeted, when more money is funneled into a particular section of, the stereotype sections. So they might go for Lebanese gangs or Syrian gangs or, Indian gangs or whatever the case may be.
Mm. It's quite astonishing seeing this because I mean when I read the article title, if you click the article, guys, it says mother of alleged Alameddine clan member charged over fake COVID-19 jab certificate. Now my initial reaction was, hang on a sec, why is it that this it's all about the jab certificate? It's not about like they go on talking about what's happened with the Alameddine family. You'd think that that would be the lead headline, not the fact that it was the jab certificate. Leaning away from the more legal side of this, Samir, is there something political going on? Is there sort of a branding going on that you see?
Oh, I think the 100% is, and I think there has been for the last 2 and a bit years now, and I don't think they want to end that quickly because I think the problem is if you just dropped everything now and just completely moved away from it, the government's going to have a lot to answer for. So they probably also, if they show this fake certificate and we're charging, we're still doing things, it's still a big concern. Everyone should be scared that some, grotesque fool has used a fake certificate and put all our lives in danger and all that kind of bullshit, in my opinion. But, that's what I think they want to run with. If they don't, and that's my biggest issue, if they leave it too soon, they drop the ball too soon, I think there's going to be more questions to answer. And I don't think that any government around the country, or the federal government for that matter, is ready for that. So I
Yeah.
completely think there's an agenda, a political agenda. There kind of has to be, because you still need to convince people COVID's completely dangerous. It's still going to kill you all. We're seeing more hospitalizations. How can someone use a fake certificate and put all our lives in danger? So that narrative has to continue, irrespective of the fact that we're now seeing more studies. Where at least people are now talking about neutralizing the field. However, the government can't drop the ball that easy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking to Samir Banger he's with Banger Legal. What sort of, you can follow him on Instagram at samir.banger. He does some excellent commentary on some of the legal cases that are going on. A lot of people, especially with the spur of the moment sort of stories like these, Samir does offer some commentary on his stories and posts. What sort of cases, leaning away from this particular case, what sort of situations do you find yourself advising people or even hearing stories about surrounding this sort of COVID mania? Like what sort of, are people still getting fired from their jobs? How are they fighting this sort of thing?
A lot of people are still facing that issue. So what we're seeing in the employment realm, and look, our firm changed dramatically over the last couple of years, and employment has become one of the biggest issues because of what's happened. Effectively, you've got people that are well and truly, they're good people, ready to work, but cannot because these mandates and directions came into place all over the country. A lot of them have been terminated based on a government mandate. In some cases, it's not really the employer's fault because they've said, look, we want to have you here, but we're going to get smashed by the government if we don't, or we'll get fined in other cases, especially now when the mandates drop, such as in New South Wales. You have certain employers still saying, like Commonwealth Bank, Westpac, if you're not jabbed, that's the end of you. We still want to get rid of you. So a lot of our focus has been there. We've got a number of criminal matters, stuff that's come from the protest, quasi-crim matters, which I consider breaches of the Act or the Health Act. So going to the protest or stuff like that. The reason I say quasi is I don't actually think in my opinion, it's not a criminal offence, although that's not the government's going to tell you, nor people who sit on the other quote unquote side. But we deal with that quite a bit. Now, there's certain cases that are going to go to the Supreme Court or potentially higher that are going to look at the legality of protesting, including under those conditions, which I hope hold up, because I don't think anyone should be stopped from doing that, especially when there is a caveat put on your rights. If you can't exit the house, why can't you protest that or have your say about that? Why are people stopped from sharing a certain view? So I think this is all very important. Even if the issue drops over the next month or two, or say 6 months, for the future, we need to deal with these issues now so it doesn't repeat itself. Because it wasn't a good time when me or you couldn't exit the house. We couldn't go to the gym. We couldn't go. We had to go only to buy food, come back in. If you had more than one person in the car, you could get fined for that. That's ridiculous. That's not okay. And we shouldn't allow that to happen again. At least we should have been granted transparency, which we weren't. But look, there's a lot of this still going on. There are a number of cases that have been in the system from 2020 and 2021 that are still in the criminal jurisdiction at the moment that still have to have their day in court. So the hearing still has to be run. Some of them are getting dropped. Some of them are not. So I think that also depends on the police station, the prosecutor, and the attitude of that particular court. For example, say, I know, let's just give a random area, the Penrith district, or the Penrith police decide about it.
This might be more of a philosophical question. This last month we saw, I think some legislation in New South Wales passed or suggested to actually put restrictions on protesters, especially climate protesters. We saw a lot of climate protesters lock down some of the vital tunnels going in and out of Sydney CBD. Where do you draw the line with this kind of with protesting?
See, I don't have a concrete answer to that myself because it's a hard one. I'd have to think about it and actually get back to you. But the problem is there needs to be some kind of limitation because you are impacting a number of people by protesting. Now, that's thousands of people who couldn't get to work, who are stuck. That's potentially the produce that was meant to go to the north side of Sydney that is stuck in the truck that has to be thrown away. That's people's livelihoods at risk, right? So that's not fair either. You'd think protesters would exercise some common sense, especially when they're green protesters, and go, okay, let's do this, but let's not smash every other fellow Australian citizen in the process. But that's not always applied. There needs to be a line. There has to be, because you don't want protesters going breaking and looting items as well. That is a big limit for me. But if it's peaceful, done in a way it doesn't impact people, that shouldn't be stopped either. The line, unfortunately, how fine or how thick it is a different story. We need to allow for it. But for example, under the conditions we had previously, if you were socially distanced, there was a number of things that couldn't be done. Here, it's just like, if you want to do it, okay, at least make it clear that you're doing it. Don't block off the tunnels. Maybe just take a lane or something along those lines. And I'm speculating, I'm making this up as I go, just to be clear. But don't detriment or don't put everyone else's life on the line. Their work on the line and detriment everyone else because of it. There are many ways it could be done. Like the truckies are doing in Melbourne, they took a lane, right? Or effectively are taking a couple. There are ways to do it. Part of that is common sense, which unfortunately isn't very common, but part of it also is just being kind to the other individuals that are around you. And it's very interesting that these particular protests got violent when we had non-violent protests beforehand, and people got hammered for that just because it was apparently the wrong thing to do. So,
yeah, well, there's a lot of protests we've seen in the past 12 months you're alluding to. One that comes to mind where they actually did exercise some common sense was the tradies in Melbourne on the construction sites when I think a jab mandate was introduced. Rather than locking down streets and not letting anyone go through, like we saw with the climate change protests this last month, they were having lunch and morning tea out on the street. And if there's all this footage of when an ambulance or a fire truck drives by, they will pick up their chairs, they move away, and then they move back again. so that people know, hey, we're here to make a statement. And, and I think we saw that a lot with the protests as well. If there was an ambulance that was trying to get through and get to an emergency, the freedom protesters would clear a way and let them get through. Yeah, I mean, philosophical questions. I mean, we could go back and forth for a while. Samir, did you have any other thoughts to leave the audience with on these particular issues?
Look, on what we discussed today, it's basically make sure you get as much context before we make decisions. Unfortunately, at certain times we can't, and this was a hard one. What you pointed out, Joel, was brilliant, and I think everyone should remember that. You've just said that headline it doesn't really summarize what that article's about. What you've said is spot on, and people need to look at that. That headline is effectively like one small part of the rest of the article, and when you've gone through it, it basically gives you a different picture. Crime is crime in certain ways, but the cops need to be a bit better than at certain things that they do. I think people need to know this is a general tactic that is deployed. And as you said, is it really fair or not on mum? Different story. I can tell you that sometimes if the cops can't find anything in a particular raid, they'll go to the ATO, they'll look up the parking fines, they'll do everything they possibly can. Some people think that's good. Some people think it's not good. There's limits to all of it. But a number of issues you pointed out are important. But look, people need to discern. They need to analyze what they're looking at reading, and also just the situation in general. Because I think, based on this, what we're seeing is we need a lot more transparency in what goes on.
It'd be really fascinating. I don't know how these trials typically pan out, so you correct me where I'm wrong. It'd be interesting if this went to a situation where there was criminal charges and it went to a trial of their peers, basically Australian citizens, looking at that and saying, you know what, no, this is not a law that we agree with. We don't agree that you should be throwing someone in prison or getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines because of providing a jab passport. The whole thing is a farce. It's an absolute, and the fact that they're doing it in our name, they're saying, because I understand the police, they have to enforce the laws that are handed down to them from Parliament, and the judges interpret those laws, and the people, they vote these people into power in Parliament. But, it'd be an amazing repudiation of these scamdemic laws if people actually stood up, if it went to a trial like that, and they said, no, this is ridiculous. The lady who's just trying to make a living, for God's sake, she, hundreds of thousands of dollars, earning hundreds of thousands of dollars through deceptive, sort of means. I mean, come on, like, it's not that essential that you get a jab.
I'd love to see more of that. I guess the problem is as a jury. So in this case, the summary matter would be dealt with in the local court. But if it was taken, say there was an election made by the accused to take the district court, I'd love to see that. Remember only a few months ago, Joel, there was a time where if you were not vaccinated and didn't have a certificate, you couldn't actually be a juror. So in those
conditions, I didn't know that.
So if you could not be a juror if you were not vaccinated. This wasn't long ago. It was only a matter of months. Now imagine running it in that climate. And imagine running it now. You may get two very different results because the people in the jury now are actually a better representation of society compared to what they were a few months ago. So that actually is an issue for me. Anyone that was tried at that time, I think, has an argument, at least on the face of it, for a prejudicial jury or to not be tried by their peers, proper peers, because you've only got a selection of, and who knows what the real statistics are of the number of people that are not vaccinated anyway. That's another question.
Well, in New South Wales, they say it's 600,000, but I think we all know that that's not right because they do tend to manipulate a lot of the numbers out there. For example, if someone's not eligible for medical reasons or they have some sort of exemption, religious or otherwise, they are automatically excluded from the jab percentage, therefore making it seem as though a greater percentage of people have been jabbed than not jabbed. But these are all the marketing techniques of politics, and that's why I'm really grateful to have people like yourself, Samir, at Banger Legal to fight these fights for us. So I want to thank you for that. And if you guys are listening to Samir right now and myself, go follow Samir Banger at Instagram. He does a lot of his coverage there. Is there anywhere else people can follow you?
Well, we've got the website now, which is bungerlegal.com.au. I need to actually do some kind of blog and stop relying on Instagram, to be honest. So I've got to improve my social media skills. But at this point, I think I'm a bit old with that. So I've got to up to date myself.
Yeah, well, you know, you never know when big tech's going to pull that rug out from under you. But I'll give you some pointers to help censorship proof yourself. Thanks so much, and if you guys find this really interesting, remember to give it a share and get it out there. These are the things that are happening in New South Wales, Sydney. I'll see you later.